What's going on, everybody? I hope everybody's still doing well and staying safe and healthy out there. Today I'd like to quickly, I'll try to keep this video brief. I recently got an email from one of the patrons asking to do a video on ways that, better ways to memorize tunes. He was suggesting that, he learns a song, but it doesn't really stick with him. And then when you go to the gig, you're like, oh man, how does that song go? Or, trying to figure out the song all over again. So I'll give you some tips or things that I use to memorize songs when I'm learning songs. And also maybe this will help kind of make the learning process a little faster. So what I typically do when I'm learning a song is try to find as many recordings of the song initially as possible. There used to be a lot more versions accessible on things like iTunes and some of the other internet streaming platforms, but for whatever reason they started to just consolidate it, I guess because there's so many different versions of the song. So now I actually go to YouTube because the great thing about YouTube is that it's more so like people driven, not necessarily executives or whoever works for Apple Music or whatever. So you have people with access to huge collections of music or whatever that put the music out there, and I'm appreciative of that, as we all are, because some of the recordings haven't been mastered for iTunes or anything like that. So some of them are just strictly still on vinyl from back in the 50s and 40s or whatever, whenever the records were released. So that's the first thing I would do. I would go out and find as many different recordings of the tune. And of course the song is going to be in various keys or whatever, but that's irrelevant as long as the arrangement or the structure of the song is typically going to be the same as far as the chord progressions. And typically, even if the artist kind of stretches the melody, the primary melody is going to be the same. And even for me, sometimes, like, you have newer artists or that may take a song and reharmonize it, do all kind of different things to it. But I would encourage to find the most, like for instance, if it's a standard, find an earlier version, that's pretty straightforward. In my opinion, artists like Dexter Gordon, even some of the vocal artists like Ella and Sarah, usually, and Joe Pass, like, they usually stick true to the actual song in the standard form. So I'm primarily speaking to standards here, because I encourage you to learn the standards, because everything else typically is based off of, like, American popular music is based off of standards, 2-5-1 progressions and things of that nature. So that's where I would start first. Find the recordings. So you want to, like, what is this thing called, Love or something? Find the recording of it and then start just listening. A lot of your memorization and a lot of the mnemonic devices that you use are going to come from your ear. If you can't hear it, then you can't play it. So that's why I encourage you to first start listening to different recorded versions of it. At least this is what has helped me. So after I find the recorded version of the song that I like, then I start to learn the progressions based off of that recorded version. So for instance, I was shedding Hot House the other day. And I was listening to Emily Remler's version of Hot House, and I was just comping along the changes with her as she was playing it. Because before you learn, for me, the melody is always king. So I would prefer that you learn the melody first. But in your oral skills or your ear training for memorizing the song, just start with comping along with the recording, and then I personally do that all the time, because not only are you learning the harmony, because the harmony, if you're playing along with other artists or other musicians, you know, in most cases, you want to know the harmony. You don't want to just be sitting on the sidelines. Okay, it's my turn to solo, but how can you solo if you don't know the harmony? Like, what are you really going to be playing? You know what I'm saying? So I start just by comping along with the whatever tune. Like, for instance, like I was saying, what is this thing called love? Start by comping along with that, and then, you know, even in my comping, try to be creative with the harmony once I learn the song. So of course, as you know, with what is this thing called love, it's not a hard song, but it is a standard. Hot House is based off of the changes. The Hot Houses are based off of the changes to what is this thing called love. So you know, G half diminished to C7 to F minor. Then you have a D minor 7 flat 5 to a G7 altered, then C major 7. And the quick thing to note, one great thing to know is that usually, particularly with standards, most of the form is AABA. So 16 bars of the song are going to be the same. Well, and in all honesty, you know, we would say, you know, like 24 bars of it are going to be the same, or be a variation of it. Usually on the last A, things may change a little bit, and even on the second A, but for the most part, the structure is the same. So these are tips to think about. So even if you kind of know a song, but you know, you're still trying to find it, if you're in a jam session situation, or even if an artist calls a song or a musician calls a song, and you're like, I think I know that song. By the second time around, because your ear will start hearing it, the changes are only going to be, you know, very, they're not going to change as much, like even on because if it's in typical AABA form. And the more you do this, the more you play along with other recordings and you know, and learning the harmony. And you can use iRealBook, you can use various, I honestly would encourage you to try to find, you know, if you find a recording that you like, try to figure out the changes on your own just based on your ear. And if you have problems, because this is what I do, like I try to stay away from memorizing charts and RealBook changes and whatever, because in most cases those are very generic, and they're not going to be the common changes, like particularly in bebop heads and melodies like that. You know, the music starts to evolve to a situation where, you know, there becomes I guess the uncharted changes, for instance, like the changes that, you know, musicians like even like that whole intro on All the Things You Are. That's usually not written in a real book, you know what I'm saying? So that's why I say all that to say, try to learn it off of the record first before you like lean on the real book changes. But if you you know, for you know, expedition, or to try to get as fast as to the end, you know, of learning the song as possible, if you feel like you want to take a peek at the changes. And some people, you know, some people are visual learners, other people are oral learners. So whatever you find to be your the easiest way for you to learn, I would encourage you to do that. But for me, I'm more of an oral learner than a visual, although I do use both. But I find myself memorizing songs better when I'm not looking at the changes and I'm just using in my ear to memorize the changes. And then going forward, so we have the first task of listening to as many versions of the song as possible, which helps because you're starting to hear the melody, you're starting to hear the changes. And like I said before, even once you have the song in your head, you know, it's kind of hard to forget it, you know, especially if it's a song that you like. So do that first. Then I would tell you to comp the changes along with whatever artist. And if you have to start by reading the changes out of a real book or a fake book or whatever, then do that. but gradually, slowly get away from the book, and that way you focus more on what's being played or the harmony that's being played, and instead of what the harmony that's being read. I've been in many situations, even to this day sometimes, where people put, I might get called to do a gig and I have to read a chart, and I find myself, I still find myself focusing sometimes more on the chart than using my ear. And I have to catch myself on more than numerous occasions, like, hey, you already know where the song is going. It's a typical standard. Get off the chart, and now let's listen. Let's focus on the ear so we can see, how we can make this situation more of a conversation in the band versus like a reading. Because you can tell people who are reading like da 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 versus people who are actually enjoying the moment and playing in the moment, which is way more important than reading, the book, reading out of the book. So that's where I would start. Then the next thing I would do is learn the melody. So the melody, like I said, I find it fun. And the bottom line, before I go any further, the bottom line to this is you gotta keep it fun. When it's fun, then it's easy to remember. When it's laborious, or when it's a situation where you're dreading learning it, it's gonna make it tough. Trust me when I say this. I promise you. I've been in many playing situations, not just in jazz, but in other, on tours and things like that, where if sometimes it may be a situation where you really don't even like the song. The song is not hip in your opinion. And it makes it harder to learn because you're like trying to force yourself to memorize something that your mind really is like, man, constantly saying, I don't like it, I don't like it, I don't like it. So what I try, in those situations, even for myself, I try to play games, like mental games with myself to try to make it fun or make it hip, and then start having little devices I use through the little mental games I play to memorize songs that I may not like, or songs that are a little bit more challenging to learn. So that's where I would start. So then going to the melody is probably going to be the more complex part, particularly bebop melodies and things of that nature, because now you're getting into memorizing intervals. And intervallic playing based on the tune can be a little challenging for your ear. So the only way, to be honest, the only method to memorize melodies is through repetition. I mean, that's just it. The more you play it, your fingers will start to develop muscle memory based on what you're hearing in your head. And that's ultimately, that's the goal of improvisation. You want to be able to play what you want your fingers to play what you're hearing in your mind. So if like they say, if you can't hear it, then you can't play it because your fingers don't know where to go. So I definitely would encourage you to you're just gonna have to break it down. There's no particularly fast way of memorizing melodies. It's just repetition. How fast can you repeat a line? And I purposely try to challenge myself, see how fast I can memorize like solos when I'm sending out these transcriptions and things, because everybody wants, especially now, we want to get to the finish line as fast as possible, and not even knowing that there really is the finish line is what we basically what we create in our heads. But the melody is king. Like George Benson said, if you can't sell me the melody, the rest of it doesn't really even matter. Your improvisation, your solos, that doesn't even matter if you don't know the melody to the song. So the best thing to memorize the melodies is going to be repetition. And when you break down, like I said, even as we're learning the harmony, the melody is still an AABA form because it's a part of the tune. So once you learn the first A section of the melody, then that's pretty much, for lack of a better term, that's like 3/4 of the battle. The only other part you got to learn is the bridge, and then you're back to usually the melody, the A section. when you're dealing with standards. Of course, when you're dealing with other songs that aren't in typical AABA form or whatever, you know, then you have to do that according to the song. But let's just, I mean, I'm just speaking on standards primarily right now, but that is pretty much it when it comes to, for me, when it comes to memorizing songs. I start by comping along with, or, you know, I start by finding various recordings of the song, comp along with the rhythm section on that recording, because as we all know, all the answers to all of your questions are in the recordings. You know, it's everything, nothing, as Russell Malone may have mentioned one time, nothing is really new under the sun. It's just various interpretations of, you know, what has already been done in most cases. You know, occasionally you have, you know, you have some new approaches, but most of the, I mean, if we only, in Western music, there's only really 12 notes. So it's all variations and permutations of something. So, so yeah, I would encourage you to do the things in that order, and let me know. I'm curious, if you, once you start down this road to memorize, I'm curious as to if it would help you, because like I said, this is what I use, and I've found it to be very helpful by comping along with the recording, and then learning the melody, of course, through just repetition. And then also, as you feel comfortable with learning the tune, then start trying to improvise along with the person that's improvising, because that's another way, that's another thing that helps me learn the songs and helps me learn that, you know, maybe some other opportunities or other possibilities for comping or various change or substitutions to the harmony. But we want to get the primary harmony first before we start subbing it. And once you get the primary harmony and the melody, then, you know, you've got the song. It's it would be hard to forget, even if you don't play it for a while. Once you, throughout the repetition of you playing it, then you should have it underneath your belt. Lastly, before I go, in my own experience, you got to play these songs. You have to play them on the bandstand. You have to force yourself to play them. Even if, and I hate to say this, you know, you don't want to practice on the bandstand, but that's why it may be advantageous to go to jam sessions or get in a situation where you and some buddies or you and friends are able to play through these tunes. You know, you can't be afraid to mess up, because you're still learning. Technically, you're still learning the song, right? It's one thing to play in the practice room, and then there's another thing to play when you hit the stand. But I personally found that when you play the song on the bandstand, the next time you play it, you're going to have it that much more under your belt. And, you know, by the second or third time, you know the song like the back of your hand, because you start to log the areas in your mind where you have faltered, and then you go back and you correct those. So it's kind of like it's almost like, it's basically all boils down to a test. You're testing yourself. You're testing your mental retention. And the best way to test it is, you know, on the quote unquote battlefield. You know, you got to see how much of it you've retained versus how much you haven't. And the more you do that, I would tell you to record yourself. Always start recording yourself. I record myself all the time. I don't necessarily publish everything, and I'm not telling you to publish everything, but I'm telling you to record, because we have the devices that, you know, the ancestors, the people before us, they didn't have the ability to record videos and all this stuff. Back when they were coming up, it was just like, you know, they had to do the stuff in 1 or 2 or 3 takes, or else they were out, you know. So for us, we have the ability to view ourselves, to record ourselves over and over and over and over again. And I really would strongly recommend you using that to your advantage on and off the stage, because you can really, you know how you want to sound. You know what, you know in your mind typically what you want to sound like. You know what sounds good, based on what you've heard. That's why I tell you to constantly listen to other artists and find people that you kind of feel represent a style, stylistically represent you. So I hope that helps. Please let me know if you would like me to go in further detail, or if you need more examples. But I really believe this is what has worked for me and helped me to memorize more songs, and even when I'm transcribing, because I know the song and the harmony of the song, it makes the transcription process that much faster. So I hope that helps. Take care. Let me know what your thoughts, and I'll talk to you soon.